Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum.
Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. In today's edition, of course, I want to talk about Remco Evenepoel because I promised you guys in the last edition that would be my next topic. Now, is Remco Evenepoel ready for next year's 2024 Tour de France? I don't think so. Not everything I've seen out of 2023. Some of you guys are sitting back there, you're like, Chris, you're crazy. He had a fantastic Giro d'Italia until he got COVID. He won the individual time trial on stage 1 and left the Giro d'Italia after winning stage 10 individual time trial while wearing the pink jersey there at the Giro. Then we start looking further. He's Belgian Road World Champion. He won the UAE Tour at the beginning of the season. He battled with Primoz Roglic in Catalonia. Then you start looking a little bit further deeper into the season before we get to the Vuelta a España. We're talking about the Road World Championships where he was up there battling in the road race trying to help Wout van Aert, not tactically a smart way, but then we saw a fantastic ride in the individual Road World Championships where Remco Evenepoel won. He goes into the Vuelta a España. He's starting there as one of the 3 favorites. We got Remco Evenepoel, Primoz Roglic, and Jonas Vingegaard that are on a whole nother page. Not even talking about page 1. They're in a galaxy far, far away, those 3 riders as the favorite to win this year's 2023 Vuelta a España, and Remco Evenepoel is one of them. Now, when you're coming into the Vuelta a España, you got to understand Jumbo-Visma are going to be willing to do a ton of work when the Vuelta a España starts because they won the Giro with Primoz Roglic. They won the Tour de France with Jonas Vingegaard. So you know they want the trifecta of Grand Tours because it's never been done in the same season. Chris Froome should get a little mention because he has done it, but not in the same season. So, but don't forget it. It's still a quality rider there and a fantastic result. But let's talk about Remco Evenepoel and go a little bit deeper. When you start looking at the Belgium Wonder Kid's form and the way he's riding physically, he's ready for the Tour de France. He has some marks against him in terms of dropping and fading a little bit on certain stages. We saw that on stage 13 in the Vuelta a España, but we've seen it in other races, even when we go back to the early parts of the season at the UAE Tour, where he got dropped on the last and final mountain stage there. It was Adam Yates from UAE team members that dropped him and dislodged him. But he held on to the race and kept the overall classification when it was all said and done. But when we start looking at Remco Evenepoel and I look at all of his races combined in the last few years, the Wonder Kid has lost a lot of races tactically, not racing smart. If we start talking about 2021, there was of course, European Championships where he's riding the front way too much. Then, of course, loses that race to Sonny Colbrelli. There's the Belgium Road World Championships in 2021, where he's attacking, following the attacks of the French riders that started early with about 170 kilometers to go in that year's Road World Championships. And then Remco Evenepoel's just not sitting there letting the French riders do the work. He's actually on the front driving at 100%. And I told you guys when we watched the Butterfly Effect, I said this kid should have won the Belgium Road World Championships in 2021, especially after Wout van Aert later said he didn't have good legs, but tactically he blew himself up. So who's to blame for this? Is this Remco Evenepoel's fault or was it the directors? When I'm sitting up here on the podium of the Butterfly Effect, I'm blaming the director sportifs because we're looking at a kid that's 23 years of age that has the power and the form to be able to win the 2024 Tour de France. Needs a little bit of things going in his favor too, of course, because who knows who Jumbo-Visma brings? Who knows if Tadej Pogacar shows up with his best form? But we know it's going to be close because UAE team members Tadej Pogacar is always close, if not on his best form. So it's questionable whether if he can win against those guys. But if he keeps tactically making mistakes like we've seen for the last 3 years from Remco Evenepoel, either from the national team's Finn back there that's giving directions that are bad at the Belgian Road Championships and blowing out Remco Evenepoel's legs before he can even get to the finish line, then of course that's not his fault, but someone is to blame. And when we look at that, it's easy to see that the national team, when we're talking about the Belgian World Championships and this year at Glasgow, they were bad tactics. The European Championships in 2021 were bad. And of course, the Olympics, when he should have been working for Wout van Aert and taking care of the big guy, his tactics attacking before the last and final big climb were catastrophically bad. So his all through the 3 years, when we're looking at his resume, they've been bad. Now here in 2023, I was hoping we would see a different Remco Evenepoel, and I'll get into this year's Vuelta a España soon. But when we start seeing how good he was at UAE Tour until he has a little hiccup on the last stage, okay, he still wins, then we see it in Catalonia. Now, when I'm sitting up here, I'm telling you 100%, Remco Evenepoel was right when he said it's easier to defend the race leader's jersey than it is to take it away. But he lost Catalonia because he wanted to sit up and do a pose when he was beating Primož Roglič, who wasn't quite at his best at this year's Catalonia, but found the tactical sense of how to handle Remco Evenepoel and keep him under control until, of course, the explosive finish, but then keep following close enough so when the Belgian kid wants to salute at the finish of the stage, he's going to lose the race leader's jersey because he didn't go all the way into the line. That was a big mistake tactically. All right, he leaves Catalonia. We know Primož Roglič won there because, of course, Primož Roglič won at Trino Adriatico too. But tactically smart was Primož Roglič through both those races when I didn't think he had great form, and Remco Evenepoel had better form but lost on tactics. Now, we start going into the Giro. I told you guys already, he won stage 1, won the individual time trial again for stage 10. And throughout those stages in between those two TTs before he went to go home, we really only saw one little hiccup from Remco Evenepoel when Primož Roglič found some good form and started to split it. I believe it was stage 8. And then, of course, we saw Geraint Thomas and Theo Gegenhardt bridge up to Primož Roglič. That's the sign that we know Primož Roglič wasn't 100% early into the Giro d'Italia, because you'd never see Geraint Thomas and you'd never see Theo Gegenhardt be able to follow a rider like Primož Roglič when he's riding 100%. Now, throughout the season, I'll throw this in there too, Primož Roglič has not necessarily been on his best form, but was still capable of winning. But when we start getting in the Vuelta a España, maybe that starts to change, because at the Giro d'Italia, it only changed on that penultimate stage when he went up the time trial. So every rider fluctuates a little bit, and when you have crashes, injuries, and just trying to bring your form up to the best you possibly can and hold it for 3 weeks is a very difficult thing to do at the Grand Tours. So it's not bad to have an off day, but you can't tactically have a bad tactics and an off day. Otherwise, it costs you a ton of energy. Now, Remco Evenepoel goes in, becomes national Belgium champion in the road race, wears the Belgium jersey after that. So you know he rode good in the middle of the season. Then he goes into the Road World Championships. And again, like I said, with the Belgian Road World Championships, tactically, Belgium were a nightmare. Not the women. Lotto Kopecky at this year's Glasgow Road World Championships in 2023. She was brilliant. Lotto Kopecky, you were money, and the whole Belgium team was money on how spotless they were with their tactics racing this season to bring that Road World jersey, rainbow band jersey to Lotto Kopecky. But the men, Wout van Aert, and of course all the host of others with Remco Evenepoel, were way too aggressive when they didn't have to be, and they can have other riders doing it. I bring that up because I'm going to talk about that kind of tactic when we start getting into the Vuelta a España. Okay. We know the Vuelta a España is coming up. There's 3 big hitters. They're, like I said, they're on a whole other galaxy in terms of how big of a favorite they are to win the Vuelta a España. If you had anyone else down on your front page that was pages ahead of everybody else at the Vuelta a España, you knew it was Remco Evenepoel, Primož Roglič, and Jonas Vingegaard. Nobody knew about the American kid Sepp Kuss, that he'd be so good. But you know he's good. You know he's solid. How solid he becomes is a different question, but you will know how solid he is after stage 3, and I'll get into that. Now the Vuelta a España starts. We have the rainy day. It's miserable. Soudal Quickstep do a solid job of getting through the course safe and sound and finishing 4th on the stage. And DSM have the race leader's jersey, which is a fantastic tactic anyways for Soudal Quickstep. And to top it off, they got the cherry on the cake. They don't have to defend the jersey because DSM have it, and Jumbo-Visma's Jonas Vingegaard flatted on that first stage, so they gained valuable time on Primož Roglič and Jonas Vingegaard. Now, we get through stage 1. It's a nightmare on stage 2 where it gets kind of annulled, and you see Andreas Kron from, of course, Lotto Destiny go up there and win stage 2. We go into stage 3. This is a very interesting stage. I want to spend a little bit of time on it, so hopefully you brought your popcorn and you're sitting down on the Chesterfield right now, because when we get into stage 3, this had strange outcome here on stage 3 when we're going up the last climb. Remember, Leonard Kemna up the road from Bora Hansgrohe solo. Sepp Kuss is going to bridge across on the last climb. We're going to see Soler, he's going to bridge across, and as we see Sepp Kuss catching Leonard Kemna, we see Soler catching there of Sepp Kuss going up the climb. Now, I told you guys when we're talking about on the butterfly effect for stage 3, I said Keanu de Brooks from Bora Hansgrohe, he was a knucklehead on this stage. Very young kid. It's understandable I was a knucklehead throughout almost all of my years of racing until I got deeper into my 30s. And then, of course, later 30s became a little bit smarter and wiser and stuff. And then in 40s and almost 42, won a Grand Tour at the Vuelta, which I thought was spotless in terms of tactics and maybe one of my best, brightest races throughout 3 weeks of racing where there was really nothing going wrong tactically that I'd done. But when we go into this stage 3, let me highlight what's happening here when Keanu Utebrooks is pulling, and then it's followed by Enric Mas. They're pulling back. Sepp Kuss and Soler, either one of those two riders would have won stage 3 there and possibly put himself in the race leader's red jersey. My money would have been on Sepp Kuss, but that's in hindsight. That day on stage 3, I'm not certain, but I still would have probably bet on Sepp Kuss because he's the better and more consistent climber and is a hard finish. Anyways, they get pulled back from Mas and Keanu Utebrooks, who are both knuckleheads. At that moment, neither one of those two riders should have been pulling in that group when Remco Evenepoel's isolated and alone, and you can have other teams start putting a threat to Remco Evenepoel. Now, possibly Remco Evenepoel closes that gap himself, but that would have been a tactical mistake, 100%. He should have stayed solid behind the wheels, which is the way the Belgium kid did. So he looked fantastic tactically as Keanu Utebrooks and Enric Mas looked like knuckleheads when they pulled back Sepp Kuss. I told you guys on the butterfly effect, at that moment, Sepp Kuss or Soler should have won that stage, but of course they get pulled back. And then we see a very calm Remco Evenepoel all the way to about 250 meters to go when he let out the sprint and ended up winning that stage 3 with that Godfather pose across the line, and then of course proceeded to go on and crash right after that stage. Now, the problem I have with this Godfather pose, when you start looking at it after the stage, Remco Evenepoel should have known that Primož Roglič finishing 4th on that stage, he should have remembered that he crashed on stage 2. So there's a good reason why the Slovenian couldn't follow the acceleration and be right there on the wheel and look like he was floundering just a little bit. But it was a magnificent ride from a rider who crashed on stage 2 to hold on to 4th on that stage and not lose any time to Remco Evenepoel. But that's win there at stage 3 to Remco Evenepoel puts himself into the race leader's red jersey. Had Enric Mas and Keanu Utebrooks not pulled, assuming Remco Evenepoel didn't close the gap himself, which he possibly could have done, and I would have almost bet money he would have done, so it would have been a mistake. But instead, he has the race leader's red jersey, Remco Evenepoel that is, instead of Sepp Kuss. If Sepp Kuss has that race leader's red jersey on stage 3, stage 6 is completely different, right? It's a whole nother story. Jumbo-Visma are in kind of a rotating role with the protecting the lead, of course, throughout stage 6, and it probably would have been a battle amongst the GC favorites going up the final climb in stage 6, and instead, Remco Evenepoel, pseudo quick-step, made a catastrophic mistake on stage 6, which I've said many times. 40 riders going up the road with Sepp Kuss one of them, and Sepp Kuss doesn't even have to work because he has 3 teammates to ride the front, and 2 of them are climbers. And the American was brilliant going up stage 6 because, of course, it was FDJ, Lenny Martinez, that had his teammate Michael Storer riding on the front the whole time up the climb until the tack started proper. And then we saw David De La Cruz pulling on the front, and when it should have been Sepp Kuss, instead Sepp Kuss is calm and he attacks. But what I want to talk about is going back to that stage 3 for pseudo quickstep. How is it when you're going up that last and final climb and you see Sepp Kuss attack and go across the Leonard Kemna in a short amount of time, Soler comes with them, and then you see after they're caught behind from Keanu Utebrooks and from Enric Mas, Sepp Kuss rides the front. He rides the front steady, Soler attacks, Sepp Kuss pulls him back, Sepp Kuss continues to ride the front all the way to the tack from Remco Evenepoel. So when Remco Evenepoel, when you were passing Sepp Kuss, didn't it occur to you at the time that, wow, Sepp Kuss, you were amazing on this stage 3. maybe there's another guy on the front page with us. Maybe instead of 3 riders, there's 4 riders up there, and Sepp Kuss should be the next one, and you have 3 Jumbo-Visma riders. Because when I'm sitting on the Chesterfield, I'm thinking after stage 3, Sepp looked really good. Now we get into stage 6, and like I said, 40 riders group up the road, and I'm seeing Sepp Kuss, who doesn't even have to pull at the front of the group. So he's got a free ride because they let not just Sepp Kuss, but 4 Jumbo-Visma riders up there, which means Sepp Kuss now has a free ride. You look at the tactical mistakes from Soudal Quickstep, and throughout the whole season, and even going back 2 years before the season, like I've already highlighted here on Beyond the Coverage, Remco Evenepoel has been a nightmare in terms of tactics. I can't blame a 23-year-old kid. I could just point out that they're there. Like I said, I've made them myself. I'm not up here saying that I'm the angel that's never made mistakes. I made all these mistakes myself. Not stage 6 from Wout van Aert in the Tour de France. That was a whole nother story 2 years back. That kind of tactic I never made. But these other kind of tactics that we're watching from Remco Evenepoel, I've made them, I've seen them, I've lived it, and many times when we go back to stage 3 again of the Vuelta a España, as I think about it later, I will go, that's right. Sepp Kuss really was on good form on stage 3 because he pulled all the way up that climb. All right, stage 6 finishes up, and we see Remco Evenepoel. He starts to drop off the back from Primoz Roglic and Jonas Vingegaard, who put 30 seconds into him. Now, luckily for Remco Evenepoel, he came better at the finish of that last final climb on stage 6, was able to hold the 2 favorites to start the Vuelta a España to, of course, that 30-second gap. But massive mistakes already being made when you think about stage 3, winning and putting yourself in the race leader's jersey, then saluting the crowd and then crashing, which probably cost him a little bit of form. And that might have been why we saw him dropped on stage 6. But then stage 6 was epically bad. Some of the worst tactics I've witnessed, right up there with that stage with Wout van Aert wearing the race leader's jersey in the Tour de France 2 years ago while he's attacking on stage 6 there of the Tour de France and gave up the race leader's yellow jersey at the Tour de France thinking he can go solo into the finish with 4 teams chasing him. But this stage 6 of the Vuelta a España, that was epically bad and right up there with Wout in terms of knuckleheadism. Now, you get out of stage 6 and you're thinking, Soudal Quickstep, that's okay. We gave the race leader's jersey away. It's only Sepp Kuss that has it. The problem, like I highlighted on the butterfly effect many times, was that having Sepp Kuss in the race leader's red jersey meant that Primoz Roglic and Jonas Vingegaard no longer have to attack on any of the following climbs at the Vuelta a España so long as Sepp Kuss is wearing the race leader's red jersey. You never attack your teammates, but Remco Evenepoel can attack your teammate, and then you can follow him and win the Vuelta a España because you're following Remco Evenepoel. Now, after stage 6, we get into stage 8. This stage was a brilliant one because it finished going up a hard climb, slight descent, and then just a little bump into the finish of about 2K, if I remember correctly, up here on the butterfly effect. When we started that penultimate climb, that was really the last climb of that stage 8, we saw Sepp Kuss attack, who could put himself into the race leader's red jersey if Lenny Martinez from FDJ drops. Now, with Sepp Kuss's attack, that's putting pressure there on Remco Evenepoel. And instead of Remco Evenepoel closing it right away immediately on a 13-14% climb, he decides to fidget with his glasses and put his glasses on. And that's allowing Sepp Kuss to get further up the road. Had he immediately brought Sepp Kuss back because of the steepness of this climb, it is the one kind of climb that early in the first week of the Vuelta a España, now stage 8, he could have had some kind of benefit where the draft is not so good. So when you're talking about stage 8, when Sepp Kuss attacks, if he follows it immediately, if he follows Remco Evenepoel's attack and follows it immediately, wash and repeat of Jonas Vingegaard, he follows that attack immediately. Because the draft is not so great, all the riders are going to be suffering, and most likely Jumbo-Visma will keep doing the 1, 2, 3 on Remco Evenepoel. Now, why they want to do it, I don't know, because Sepp Kuss is still ahead on the general classification and could put himself in the race leader's jersey at the end of the race. So when I saw Sepp Kuss first attacking, okay, when he first goes, if Remco follows it, after the next wash and repeat from Primoz and Jonas, like I just got done explaining, if they keep doing that, they're knuckleheads. They don't have to. They have to put the pressure on Remco Evenepoel to go to the front. Well, Sepp Kuss went up the road, and all I'm thinking about when I'm sitting on the Chesterfield is I hope he doesn't go 100% because otherwise he might get dropped from Remco Evenepoel, who looks spectacularly strong on stage 8. He did some impressive tempo up that final climb on stage 8, but While fidgeting with his glasses, he let the gap extend too far out there to Sepp Kuss, and then, of course, had the tempo the whole time with Jonas and Primo sitting on his wheel, when it would have been better to either be getting attacked by Jumbo and just boom, 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 follow immediately. Because if you're the best climber in the race, on a climb like that that's 14%, it's not difficult to follow attacks that are coming 1, 2, 3 and you the whole time up that climb. Instead, we saw Remco Evenepoel set a steady tempo that nobody could attack the Belgian kid on from Pseudo Quickstep. He goes over that climb, rides basically 3-4 kilometers down the descent, rides into the final climb, goes up the final climbs and gives the stage victory, of course, to Primož Roglič. And then later Remco says, hey, I didn't know that the break was caught. So he gave the time bonuses away to Primož Roglič when he could have gained more time on those. And of course, if he attacked wisely going up the steeper climb just before the finish, he could have possibly gotten rid of Sepp Kuss and got some time on him, because Sepp Kuss did the first big attack from Jumbo-Visma, and I'm sure that's why he was put in the red a little bit and lost a few seconds at the finish of that stage to his teammate Primož Roglič. So tactically, there was mistakes made all over when we're talking about Remco Evenepoel not being wise enough to just follow the moves, or at least follow it immediately and then attack himself on such a steep finish. And then, of course, tactically from the director sportifs, we've seen nightmare after nightmare for multiple years. And on stage 8, somehow it wasn't relayed or it wasn't heard through the race radio that the break had all been caught and was back together. And they gave up time to Primož Roglič, who won his first stage of the Vuelta a España. Now, we'll fast forward just a little bit. We'll get into stage 13. There's nothing Pseudo Quickstep can do about a stage 13. It pops out of nowhere when you have a bad day like that. That's it. It's over. The problem I have is after stage 13. We see 27 minutes lost on stage 13, and I told you guys on the butterfly effect, what I really wanted to see of Remco Evenepoel in these later stages is not going for stages against the B riders in the Vuelta a España, which is everybody but 4 riders, because Remco, Jonas, Primož, and Sepp are the top 4. So what I wanted to see really was the experience that Remco Evenepoel can get by following the top 3 Jumbo-Visma riders in the other stages. Now, you all are saying, probably 99.9% of you that are watching this, you're like, Chris, it's crazy. That stage 14 victory from Remco Evenepoel was epic. And it was epic. It was fantastic to see how he could pull so hard through the flats and attack so many times and then ride everybody off his wheel on a especial climb. But that's what we expect out of Remco Evenepoel. What we really want to see is the battle that was supposed to happen before the Vuelta a España started. Primož Roglič and Jonas Vingegaard going head-to-head with Remco Evenepoel. Now, why did I want to see that? Well, first off, that would have been the real victory for Remco Evenepoel, where he's celebrating on stage 14. Yes, in terms of press and PR, it was exceptional to win stage 14 and 18 from the breakaway, but he lost his opportunity to battle head-to-head with Primož Roglič and Jonas Vingegaard. And I'll give you a short story. In 2013 at Trino Adriatico, I was racing the first big mountain summit, and it was one of the first few times where I really got to battle against Chris Froome. I battled against him a little bit in 2012 Tour de France when Wiggins won, but they were so far above me at that moment that I never battled with them. I was getting dropped 1/3 of the way up the climb. But here in 2013 was my first time with Alberto Contador tacking up that climb. It was Sky back there setting the pace, and I'm sitting on Chris Froome's wheel while we're seeing guys attack left and right. And I'm thinking, Alberto Contador, you got no chance because we got 3 Sky guys on the front, and I'm just going to sit here on Chris Froome's wheel, wait for him to attack. Well, the education that I got from that stage at Trino Adriatico in 2013 was massive. This kind of tactic is what Remco Evenepoel could have learned throughout these later stages from 14 all the way to the 21 at the Vuelta a España, where I learned when Chris Froome attacked, we were doing 650, 750 watts. I was doing it on his wheel. I don't know what Chris Froome was doing because he weighs more than me and he's in the wind. When he does the pull and brings back near the summit finish there of that stage, he brings back Alberto Contador, and then he shuts the gas down for a second. And I thought we were shutting it down for like 5, 10, 20 seconds. He shut it down, and then he just turned it right back on and blew me straight off his doors, went around Alberto Contador, and went up and took the race leader's jersey and the stage. Now, I wasn't going to stay on the wheel of Chris Froome, but maybe if I had the experience of following him before, I would have known he's going to back off a little bit. So I back off just a little bit sooner before he catches Alberto Contador, gets 1 or 2 seconds rest for myself, and then I follow him for another 5 or 10 seconds, and maybe on that stage I finished second on the stage instead of where I did behind Alberto Contador at that stage of Trino Adriatico. But that's what I'm saying, is you can learn so much tactically by staying with riders. And once you lost on stage 13, Remco Evenepoel at the Vuelta a España, the next objective should have been, in my mind, stay with Jonas Vingegaard, Primoz Roglic, Sepp Kuss. Let's learn something from this race. And then you guys at home may be saying, Chris, he won the KOM jersey, he won 2 more stages. Okay, so he did. He won 3 stages total. But those last 2 stages, he didn't beat the competition that he really needed to beat. And if he was really good, it would have looked more impressive had he waited to stage 17 on the most famous climbing mountain stage in the European peloton right now, the Angliru. And if he had dropped everybody when Primoz Roglic dropped Sepp Kuss and had Jonas Vingegaard holding on to his wheel there, if he had dropped those 2 before the summit of the Angliru and soloed in, guess what? He still gets a stage victory at the Vuelta a España, and he wins on the Angliru. That would have been epic, and that would have been worth giving up 2 breakaway wins and the KOM jersey at the Vuelta a España. And that education that he learned going up to Angliru following those guys might have been a massive help that could bring into the 2024 Tour de France. And instead, he got 2 stage victories from breakaways. Yes, I was impressed. There's no doubt about it. Everybody was. But were any of you guys really surprised by it? That's what he's done throughout the last 3 seasons of his year. And that's why he's number 4 ranked on the butterfly effect and beyond the coverage, because I respect his power so much. But again, when you're talking about 2024 Tour de France and the last 3 seasons of racing, I don't think Soudal Quick-Step are ready for it. I don't think so. If I had gone into this year's Vuelta a España as Soudal Quick-Step with Remco Evenepoel and I was the director, I would have said, hey, stage 17 is when we want to be in the race leader's red jersey. You follow the 2 favorites, Jonas Vingegaard and Primoz Roglic, and certainly don't let Sepp Kuss go up the road and gain 4 minutes in a breakaway of 40 on that stage when you know how good of a rider Sepp Kuss is because you saw it on stage 3. So, after stage 3, you've added 3 favorites from Jumbo-Visma. Those riders are always watched throughout the Vuelta a España. You wait for stage 17, where it's 24%, and it's the most feared climb in Europe called the Angliru. And if you can't drop them on the Angliru and get yourself in the race leader's red jersey, you weren't going to win anyways. And if you do get yourself in the race leader's jersey for Soudal Quick-Step with a team that was super, super underpowered, because there was only one Matteo Cattaneo that was exceptional for Soudal Quick-Step, but they didn't have the depth at this year's Vuelta a España, especially after losing one rider on stage 8, Baggioli. So that meant they needed to ride perfect, and they needed to look at the Angliru stage when it's so steep that there is still and always a draft behind the riders, but it is going to be the most minimal it could ever be at any of those stages at this year's 23 Vuelta a España. So Remco Evenepoel and his directors all made catastrophic mistakes because they didn't wait for stage 17 on the Angliru to put Remco Evenepoel in the race leader's red jersey. Now, that's the way I see it. Will their tactics change at the 2024 Tour de France? I don't know. If it stays the same, they should just keep Remco Evenepoel out of the 24 Tour de France and get him prepped for the Giro or for the Vuelta a España, where hopefully Primoz Roglic and Jonas Vingegaard and Tadej Pogačar, the number 1 ranked rider in the butterfly effect, show up at July. Maybe Remco Evenepoel could win the Giro or win the Vuelta, which I'm sure he could, which would just bring up the energy again into the following 25 Tour de France and maybe give Patrick Lefebvre, the manager from Soudal Quick-Step, more time to get more experience and race more tactically smart, and more time to bring in some more quality climbers into the team to help Remco Evenepoel win the 2025 Tour de France. Because in 2024, at this moment, from what I've seen from 3 years of racing, tactically, it is a nightmare from Remco Evenepoel, and even worse from the Director Sportif sitting in the car. Whether if we're talking about the Belgium Director Sportif for the Olympics, for the World Championships, and for the European Championships, those were all catastrophic. And then when we're talking about Soudal Quick-Step, they have to get wiser. And when you're looking at the Vuelta a España, I don't see how they don't see that the Angliru was the stage to take the race leader's red jersey on, and I can't see stage 6 as ever being an intelligent tactic with 4 guys from Jumbo-Visma, and one's called Sepp Kuss, and you're going to put himself and you're going to put the American in the race leader's red jersey to fight and battle against, while his two teammates are going to sit on your wheel up every mountain stage if Jumbo-Visma race tactically intelligently. Well, that's my take up here on Beyond the Coverage. Remco Evenepoel, you got to get smarter. Pseudo, Quick-Step, you guys are way behind the 8 ball. You got to improve before July 2024 Tour de France, because we want to see a spectacular battle, 4-way battle. Tadej Pogacar, Remco Evenepoel, Jonas Vingegaard, and Primoz Roglic. Hopefully they take you. If they don't, quit and never ride your bike again for Jumbo-Visma. But if they do take you, we got a 4-way battle getting ready for July's 2024 Tour de France. Like and subscribe. I'll see you guys on the next edition of Beyond the Coverage real soon.